On the coast of Peru, a city rose at the same time as the pyramids of Egypt. It had monuments. It had thousands of people. It had no walls, no weapons, and not a single body with its skull caved in. This is Caral, what its excavators call the oldest city in the Americas. And it breaks the rules we thought civilizations followed. It was built before pottery, before writing, and, as far as anyone has found, without war. One of the founding civilizations of the human story arose here. And then, after 1,000 years, its people seem to have simply walked away. The mystery of Caral is not how they built it. It is how they held it together. Caral sits in the Supe Valley, about 23 kilometers inland from the Pacific. Its central zone covers around 65 hectares of monumental, residential, and non-residential architecture. And it is just one of 18 large early sites packed into that single valley. Radiocarbon dating places the start of monumental building here at roughly 2627 BCE. We know that date from an almost humble source, woven bags of cut reeds, called shikra, that the builders filled with stones and stacked inside the platforms, the plant fiber carbon dated layer by layer. Hold that date for a moment. When the first stones of Egypt's pyramids were being set, a city the same age was already standing on the other side of the world, and no one in Egypt would ever know it existed. Caral rose about 1,000 years after the first cities of Sumer, and some 2,000 years before the Olmec of Mexico, with no contact, no trade, no shared idea between any of them. It is one of only a handful of places on Earth where civilization was invented from scratch. And Caral was not alone. It was the centerpiece of a wider society archaeologists call the Norte Chico, or Caral Supe. A study published in 2004 dated 95 new radiocarbon samples, drawn from 13 of more than 20 large sites across 4 river valleys, and found they shared the same signature. Large-scale monumental architecture, sprawling residential building, and a complete lack of ceramics, flourishing between 3000 and 1800 BCE. The site itself had been noticed as early as 1905 and surveyed in the 1940s. But it was the Peruvian archaeologist Ruth Shady Solis who, from the mid-1990s, established just how old and how important it really was. What makes Caral extraordinary is not what it has. It is what it is missing. Start with the pottery, or rather the lack of it. Caral is a preceramic civilization. It built planned cities, raised platform mounds, and ran irrigation agriculture, all before it made a single clay pot. That inverts the order we expect. The textbook story is pottery first, then villages, then cities. Caral did it backwards. Monuments before ceramics. They left almost nothing of themselves behind. But among the ruins were more than 30 flutes carved from bird bone and dozens of horn-like cornets. A civilization with music, but no pottery. The monuments are real, and they are huge. 6 large platform mounds, sunken circular plazas, an amphitheater. The largest pyramid runs roughly 150 meters long and stands perhaps 20 meters high or more. The exact figure is debated, so picture something on the scale of a city block, raised by hand. UNESCO, which inscribed the site in 2009, calls it the oldest center of civilization in the Americas. A word of precision on that. Oldest is the excavator's claim, and it is genuinely debated in the details, whether Caral specifically or another nearby site holds the record. And it means the oldest known city, the oldest urban complex, not necessarily the single oldest structure in the Americas. The honest line is the careful one. This is among the very first cities of the New World, and then there is the absence that draws the most attention. No war. Across the entire Late Archaic Norte Chico, the excavators report no fortifications, no weapons, and no mutilated bodies or burned buildings. The settlements are laid out openly, undefended. For a society of this size and age, that is startling, because the standard model of how civilizations form leans heavily on conflict. States arise, the theory goes, to wage war or defend against it. Caral suggests another path entirely, that monuments and cities and a lasting social order can be built on cooperation and exchange instead. But be careful here, because this is the kind of claim that gets overstated. What the evidence shows is that no sign of organized warfare has been found. Not that war was impossible or that these people were incapable of it. It is an argument from an absence, across a record that is still only partly excavated. A powerful absence, but an absence. Here is the thesis of this video. The deep question about Caral was never how. It is dug as thoroughly as almost any site of its age. The question is what powered it. And on that, the experts genuinely disagree. The economy combined inland farming with an intensive fishery on the nearby coast. Cotton, grown but not eaten, sat at the center of it, spun into nets, bags, and textiles. Inland farmers grew the cotton the coastal fishermen needed for their nets. The fishermen sent protein back inland. A coast and valley economy knotted together. But which side came first? Which one built the civilization? That is the fight. One school traces back to a single, radical proposal. In the 1970s, the archaeologist Michael Mosley argued for what's called the maritime foundations hypothesis. The Pacific here is extraordinarily rich in anchovy and sardine, and Mosley proposed that this marine abundance, not farming, fed the population boom that made complexity possible. It was a radical idea because it challenged the axiom that you need agriculture before you can build a civilization. A second school, led by Jonathan Haas and Winifred Creamer, pushed back. The inland valley sites were far larger and more populous than the coastal ones, and they grew up on irrigation agriculture. On this reading, the farmers were dominant, and the coast played a supporting role. Then more recently, two new lines of evidence reframed the whole question. In 2017, one study argued the real driver was a technology, the shift from gathering wild plant fiber to cultivating cotton, which let people make vastly more fishing line and netting. Fishing and farming, on this view, were never rivals but parts of one integrated society. And then the chemistry settled in behind it. Studies of the bones themselves, what these people actually ate, found the diet at both the inland and the coastal sites was dominated by plant carbohydrates, not seafood. A 2024 reanalysis of more than 500 individuals across the region reached a blunt conclusion. In these early societies, it was plant cultivation, not fishing, that fueled the rise of complexity. So the strongest version of the anchovies built civilization story does not hold. But which area came first, and how the coast and the valleys shared the work? That remains genuinely open. The honest answer is that we are still arguing about what fed the first city in the Americas. And that is not the only thing still open. We do not know how the peace held. No rulers we can clearly identify, no army, no fortifications, and yet thousands of people cooperated to raise monuments for 1,000 years. What bound them, in the absence of force, we cannot say. We do not know what they recorded. In a cache buried inside one of the pyramids, the excavators found a knotted cord, which Ruth Shady has suggested may be among the oldest quipu, the Andean knot records, ever found. If she is right, the tradition would be thousands of years older than anyone thought. But the object has never been formally published or fully described, so it remains a tantalizing possibility, not a proven fact, and certainly not writing. We do not even fully agree on who gets to call it first. The early work on Caral was followed by a bitter dispute over credit and priority between Shady and her former collaborators. A reminder that even the question of which site is the oldest is tangled up in human rivalry, and we do not know with certainty why they left. Around 2200 to 1800 BCE, as a long drought gripped the region, the people of Caral appear to have relocated, rebuilding the same culture at new sites rather than fighting over what was left. Managed migration, not violent collapse. But the full story of that departure is still being written. We tend to look for the mystery of an ancient city and its technology, some impossible feat of engineering, some lost secret. Caral offers none of that. It is ordinary in its materials and exhaustively studied. Its mystery is harder and more human. That one of the founding civilizations of our species was built without pottery, without writing, and, as far as we can tell, without war. A city as old as the pyramids, that left no record of a single battle and then walked quietly away from itself. We are still trying to understand how that was even possible.